Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Chong Ju Lian and today I will cover on this topic. Today I would like to talk about wildlife management in practice, namely preventing extinctions. As such, I shall cover the definition of extinction, how population goes extinct with examples of species that went extinct or those that came close to extinction. Also, I will be talking on steps on preventing extinctions of wildlife populations. Extinction is the end of existence for a group of organisms due to its inability to adapt to changing environmental conditions. Extinction can affect individual species and also collection of related species such as those of the same family, order or class. These include extinct, meaning there is no individuals of the species that exist in the world. Extinct in the wild means that the species is kept alive only in captivity or under other human control situations such as the franklin tree. A species is considered as globally extinct if it is extinct or extinct in the wild. When a species is locally extinct or extirpated, it is no longer found in an area where it was once found, but it can be found elsewhere in the world. If a species is considered as ecologically extinct, it means the species is at much reduced numbers until its effects on other species is insignificant. Extinction can be divided into driven extinction and stochastic extinction. Let's look at driven extinction. This type of extinction is when a population environmental changes to its disadvantage, causing the population rate of increase to fall below zero, which in turn causes the decline of the population. As such, extinction caused by environmental fluctuations and catastrophes are included under driven extinction. As for stochastic extinction, this is when events that happen by chance is important and have terminal effects on the population, especially when the population has low numbers. Under stochastic extinction, there are two types, namely extinction by demographic malfunction and extinction by genetic malfunction. Extinction by demographic malfunction occurs when a population goes extinct by accidents, since it is so small until its population dynamics are very much influenced by individual of its population. As for genetic malfunction extinction, this happens when a population is at low numbers for several generations, loses heterozygosity to the level when recessive semi-letters are exposed with average fitness dropping, which in turn the population will decline even further and lastly goes extinct. Now we look at some cases of species going extinct or those that came close to extinction with underlying factors. First, let's look at habitat change and fragmentation. Most extinctions appear to have been caused by habitat changes, with one form of habitat loss being habitat fragmentation or fragmentation of continuous habitat into patches. Over time, the patches become smaller, gaps between them become larger, and ratio of age to interior habitat of the patches become larger. This can lead to rapid loss of species remaining as it creates barriers to the normal processes of dispersal, colonization and foraging, and environmental conditions in the fragments may change. This will include age effects where the microenvironment at a different fragment age is different from the forest interior, making it vulnerable to invasive and pest species. One clear case of species going extinct is the gull island vole, which is only found on the 7-hectare gull island off Long Island, New York. It was discovered and described in 1889. Sadly, after Fort Michi was built there in 1897, the species has not been seen until now. Secondly, let's look at the effect of food loss to species. As we know, food is essential to animals as the energy in food serves as fuel for the metabolic processes of animals, and nutrients in the food support growth and maintenance of body structure. In the Munta-Turai Sanctuary, which is a tiger reserve, removed its cattle from its ground and also started controlled fires. These practices cause exotic vegetation and other species that is not palatable to wild ungulates, such as deer, to thrive. These wild ungulates require grassland, so their populations decline. When the wild ungulates declined, so did the tiger and leopard populations in the reserve. Third, the effect of introduced predators. A well-known case of extinction due to introduced predators is the case of the Stephen Island wren. The Polynesian rat was the causal effect of its extinction on the mainland, and the last wren was actually killed by a domestic cat. Fourth, extinction can also be caused due to the side effects of pest control. One example is the case of the black-footed ferret in North America. This species is closely associated with the prairie dog, as 90% of its diet comprises of prairie dogs. When the prairie dogs were considered as pests and attempts were made to eradicate them, populations of the black-footed ferret also declined when the prairie dogs declined. Fifth, the effects of unregulated commercial hunting. We can see the effects when commercial hunting is not controlled, especially in the case of commercial whaling, where whales are killed for their meat, blubber, and oil. In addition, it is important to note that when an organism is harvested commercially, the yield must be regulated by an organization whose existence and funding is independent of the economics of the industry that it regulates. Otherwise, it will just endorse the economic decisions of the industry, which may drive the stock to very low numbers, which then lead to extinction, and then switch to another stock. 6. Although recreational hunting is considered safer than commercial hunting, however, examples of gross exploitation has been recorded. For example, the Arabian ox. 7. Effect of competition with introduced species also have implication on the native species. Let's look at one example. More bird species were introduced to the Hawaiian Islands than any other comparable land area. For example, the Japanese white-eye, an introduced species, was implicated in the decline of the Hawaiian creeper in the 1940s. 8. Environmental contaminants has also been shown to have effects on species. A well-known example is documented in Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, on the effects of DDT on birds, causing the eggshells to be too thin and fragile, so they crack when the birds try to sit on them. DDT accumulates in the food chain, and thus it affects species such as raptors, which are at the very top of the food chain. By 1970s, most countries banned DDT, and gradually, populations of several raptors in North America and Europe recover gradually. 9. Extinction can also be due to introduced diseases, although these are quite hard to pinpoint on. Diseases such as avian malaria and avian pox has been suggested as factors that contribute to Hawaiian birds' decline. This is since some Hawaiian birds, such as honey creepers, are highly susceptible to malaria as compared to those introduced species. Lastly, it is important to take note that sometimes extinction is caused by multiple causes. A well-known example is the heath hen. It was originally found in much of northeastern United States until hunting and habitat destruction caused it to be limited to Martha's Vineyard. A refuge was established and population began to rebound, but then a fire caused by a gale, a tough winter, poultry disease, predation all contributed to imbalanced sex ratio and inbreeding dispersion. As such, it is of note that multiple causes can contribute to the extinction of a species. Now, let's look at steps that we can take to prevent extinction. First, we need to recognize the problem. This is important as many species will go Now, let us look at steps that we can take to prevent extinctions. First, we need to recognize the problem. This is important as many species go unnoticed and may be on the brink of extinction before we are aware of the problem. For example, smaller mammals, birds, frogs, and reptiles tend to be overlooked as compared to larger animals. Secondly, we need to know and identify how did the population of species decline. Is the cause of decline due to single or combination of factors? Also, are these factors also in operation? And if so, can we neutralize them? This is important because as a species can seldom be rescued until factors driving its decline are identified and removed. Third, for the rescue and recovery of near extinctions. There is a wide range of management actions that can be utilized to rescue a species from extinction. For example, a change in registration and law sometimes is just what is needed. For example, a ban on hunting the Canadian musk oxen successfully reversed the decline of the species, and even conservative hunting quotas later introduced in the 1970s did not stop their recovery. Usually, active management of the species is necessary. In the case of the Lord Howe's island wood hen, predators control such as feral pigs and domestic cats. Usually, active management of the species is necessary. In the case of the Lord Howe's island wood hen, predator control such as feral pigs and domestic cats and also captive breeding successfully reversed the decline of the species. Generally, the management actions needed are seldom more than the conventional management techniques, unless a species is really in a terrible stage. Ex situ techniques can be used to preserve and increase a population of endangered species outside its natural habitat before it can be reintroduced. Reintroduction is important, but before reintroduction can be conducted, there must be some information and understanding of why the species went extinct there in the first place. However, when the cause of local extinction is not known, and it is not known if the factor that caused the extinction is still operating, then a trial reparation should be conducted before any serious attempt to repopulate the area. 20 or more individuals forming the probe is released with radio collars, and others, if possible, must be monitored carefully. If they decline, then the factors contributing can be identified and countermeasures taken. Additionally, a closely related species can be used as probe when it is too risky to use individuals of the endangered species. For example, Indian condors were used as probe before Californian condors were released from a captive breeding program in 1992. Lastly, it is important to note that national parks and reserves play an important role in conservation, as in these areas alone, conservation of species is placed utmost over any other users of the land. In addition, community conservation outside national parks and reserves are also essential, as some species or association of species rarely occurs in reserves because parks and reserves do not capture a representative sample of the biota. As such, generally, registration is the main means by which conservation is advanced outside reserves. I hope you have enjoyed this topic. Goodbye and see you again.